South Lebanon, north of the Litani River, November 14, 2017, 02:43. Local time. The silence of the olive grove was deceptive. To the naked eye, the terraced hillsides of southern Lebanon were sleeping, bathed in the pale milky light of a waning gibbous moon. The air smelled of damp earth, wild thyme, and the faint acrid residue of diesel exhaust that clung to the valley floor. But to the sensors of the Iton drone circling at 40,000 feet, the landscape was screaming. Electromagnetic signatures pulsed like a heartbeat. Thermal plumes rose from invisible vents concealed beneath the roots of ancient trees. Down in the dark, men were moving. On the ground, a convoy of 3 nondescript Volvo trucks navigated a dirt track meant for goat herders. They moved without headlights, the drivers wearing night vision goggles that painted the world in grainy green phosphorus. The suspension of the trucks was modified, reinforced struts and hydraulic dampeners designed to cushion a payload that was both incredibly heavy and terrifyingly fragile. Inside the lead truck, the driver, a man named Hisham, wiped sweat from his forehead. He was not a soldier, but a logistician for the Jihad al-Bina Foundation. He knew what was in the crates behind him. They were not construction materials. They were kits, precision guidance upgrade units sent from Tehran, flown into Damascus, and driven across the porous border into the Bekaa Valley. Once installed on dumb gravity rockets, these kits would turn a weapon that could miss a city block into one that could hit a specific window in the Tel Aviv military headquarters. Hisham checked his watch. 02:45. They were 4 minutes behind schedule. Tighten the gap. He radioed to the trucks behind. The architect does not tolerate delays. The architect. Hisham had never met him. Few had. He was a ghost story told among the lower ranks of Hezbollah's logistics wing. Some said he was an Iranian general. Others claimed he was a Lebanese banker who lived in a penthouse in Akhrafiyeh. All they knew was that his roots never failed. Until tonight. At 02:48, the lead truck hit a pressure plate. It wasn't an explosive mine. It was a sensor buried 6 months ago by a Sayeret Matkal reconnaissance team during a moonless night. 300 kilometers away, in a subterranean command center in Tel Aviv, a red light blinked on a console. Signature confirmed, a young lieutenant said, his voice flat, professional. Convoy Alpha is in the kill box. The mission commander, a colonel with graying temples and eyes tired from staring at screens, leaned forward. We are not striking. The room went silent. The operators looked at him. The doctrine was clear. Prevent the transfer of precision munitions. Sir? The lieutenant asked. The window is closing. Estimated time to the bunkers is 12 minutes. I said stand down, the colonel repeated. We don't want the hardware tonight. We want the man who sent it. He turned to a separate screen where a complex network graph was displayed. At the center was a black silhouette with a question mark. The architect has been perfect for 5 years, the colonel murmured. Tonight we let him win. We let him feel safe, because a man who feels safe makes mistakes. The convoy rolled on, disappearing into the hidden bunker network carved into the limestone. The guidance kits were delivered. The architect's record remained unblemished. But the trap had been set. The Mossad didn't want the arrows. They wanted the archer. And to catch him, they would have to go into the heart of the most hedonistic, chaotic, and dangerous city in the Middle East, Beirut. Mossad headquarters, north of Tel Aviv. Directorate of Operations, Caesarea Unit. December 2nd, 2017. The room was sterile, soundproofed, and smelled faintly of ozone and stale coffee. On the wall, a projection displayed a series of grainy surveillance photos, passport scans, and financial flowcharts. Target analysis, codename Cobalt, the analyst began. She was young, brilliant, wearing the uniform of Unit 8200, Israel's Signals Intelligence Corps. She clicked a remote and the face of a man appeared. He was handsome in a rugged, distinguished way, late 40s, silver hair swept back, wearing a tailored suit. He looked like a man who owned vineyards in Tuscany, not a man who managed the logistics of a terrorist army. Name, Elias Kanian, the analyst said. Born in Beirut, 1972, Maronite Christian family. Father was a minor warlord during the Civil War, killed in '82. Kanaan was sent away, boarding school in Switzerland, University in London, MBA from LSE. He returned to Beirut in 2005 after the Syrian withdrawal. Public profile? Asked Yossi, the operational commander of the mission. He sat at the head of the table, a man who looked like a retired mechanic, but possessed one of the sharpest tactical minds in the agency. Venture capitalist, import-export, real estate developer. He owns shares in 3 hotels, a shipping line, and half the bars in the Mar Mikhail district. He is a fixture of Beirut high society, donates to the Red Cross, attends the Baalbek festival, dates models. And the connection? Yossi asked. The connection is invisible, but it's there. The analyst replied, bringing up a complex financial web. Kanian owns a logistics firm called Cedar Chain Solutions. On paper, they move luxury cars and medical equipment. In reality, Cedar Chain is the primary conduit for IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, hardware entering Lebanon via sea routes. Kanian doesn't touch the weapons. He touches the paperwork. He bribes the customs officials. He rents the warehouses. He hires the trucks. He applies Western efficiency to jihadist logistics. Yossi tapped a pen against the table. He's a facilitator, a mercenary. Not exactly, the analyst corrected. We believe he is ideologically aligned, but not religiously. He views Hezbollah as the only defense against, well, us. He's a nationalist, and he's incredibly careful. No electronic footprint, no phone calls to known terrorists. He meets his contacts in person, always in public, always in noise. Where? Nightlife, the analyst said, changing the slide to show vibrant, blurry photos of neon-lit streets. Beirut at night, the Gemaizeh and Mar Mikhail districts, the loudest places in the city. Techno clubs, jazz bars, rooftops. It's his office. The noise defeats directional microphones. The crowds defeat surveillance teams. It's perfect cover. Yossi leaned back. So we can't tap him. We can't drone him without causing a diplomatic incident in a Christian neighborhood. We can't grab him without starting a war. We have to recruit him, someone suggested from the back. He won't turn, the analyst said. He's wealthy, he's committed, and he has no obvious vices we can leverage. No gambling debts, no secret families. Yossi stood up and walked to the screen, staring into the eyes of Elias Kanin. If we can't break him, and we can't buy him, Yossi said softly, we have to become him. Or rather, we have to become the thing he wants most. And what is that? Yossi pointed to the file. Kanan is a collector. He collects art, he collects watches, he collects experiences. He considers himself a man of refined taste in a world of barbarians. He's lonely, not for company but for an equal. He turned to the team. Get me the file on Layla. Safe House, the Negev Desert. January 2018. The desert wind howled outside the isolated villa, rattling the shutters. Inside, a woman sat in a comfortable armchair, reading a book on the history of Phoenician trade routes. She was 32 years old, with dark, intelligent eyes and a face that could shift from forgettable to stunning with a simple change of expression. Her hair was dark brown, currently cut in a sharp, chic bob. Her hands were manicured, but the calluses on her trigger finger and knuckles told a different story. Her name was Sarah, but for the next year, she would be Sophie Dubois. Yossi sat opposite her. On the table between them lay a stack of documents, a French passport, bank cards, a driver's license, membership cards for the Louvre and the Tate Modern, and a backstory so detailed it included the name of her childhood dog. Sophie Dubois, Yossi said, testing the name. Tell me about her. Sarah closed the book and looked up. Her posture changed instantly. She crossed her legs, tilted her chin, and her voice dropped an octave, acquiring a slight, elegant Parisian rasp. I was born in Lyon, 1985, she recited effortlessly. My father was a diplomat stationed in Damascus and Beirut in the 90s, which is where I learned my Arabic. I studied art history at the Sorbonne and worked for Christie's in London for 5 years before going independent. I represent a private consortium of investors, mostly Gulf money, some European, looking to acquire contemporary Levantine art. I am divorced, no children. My ex-husband was a bore who cared more about his golf handicap than Modigliani. Yossi nodded. Why Beirut? Why now? Because Beirut is the last frontier of raw artistic expression, she said, her eyes lighting up with a manufactured passion. The pain of the region creates the most beautiful art. And my investors are looking for assets that are undervalued. Beirut is a gamble, and I am a gambler. Good, Yossi said, but Elias Canaan is not just an art lover. He is a predator. If he smells a lie, you are dead. There is no extraction team in Marmakel. If you are compromised in a club, you are on your own until you can get to the sea. I don't intend to be compromised, Sarah said, her voice reverting to its natural, steely tone. We are building your legend now, Yossi explained. We have purchased 3 paintings at auction in Paris under your alias. We have rented an apartment in Acrafier, high ceilings, old French mandate style. We have set up a shell company, Dubois Art Consulting, with a working website and a physical office in Dubai. When Canaan Googles you, and he will see a successful, independent woman. What is the hook? She asked. We don't hook him, Yossi said. You do. He hangs out at a place called the Blue Note in Gemaiza and a rooftop bar called Iris. He likes jazz. He likes silence amidst the noise. You are going to be the only person in the room who isn't trying to get his attention. That is how you get his attention. Yossi slid a small velvet box across the table. Inside was a watch, a vintage Patek Philippe Calatrava, 1950s model. Understated, incredibly expensive. Wear this. He checks wrists before he checks faces. Sarah put the watch on. It felt heavy, cold, the weight of the mission. One more thing, Yossi added, his expression darkening. Canaan is charming. He is educated. He is not a monster with a knife in his teeth. He will make you laugh. He will treat you with respect. Do not forget that he signs the papers that send missiles into kindergartens in the north. I know what he is, Sarah said. Good. Then pack your bags, Sophie. You have a flight to catch. Rafik Hariri International Airport, Beirut, February 14th, 2018. The arrival hall was a sensory assault. Families shouting greetings, taxi drivers hustling for fares, the thick humidity mixing with the smell of cigarette smoke and jet fuel. Sophie Dubois walked through the chaos with the detached elegance of a woman who had seen it all. She wore large sunglasses and a linen blazer. A porter pushed a cart with her Louis Vuitton luggage. She moved towards the VIP exit, ignoring the taxi twos. A black Mercedes S-Class was waiting for her, arranged by the hotel. Mademoiselle Dubois? The driver asked. Oui, she replied, handing him her bag. As the car merged onto the highway leading into the city, Sophie looked out the window. Beirut sprawled before her, a majestic wreck. Skeletal concrete structures from the war stood next to gleaming glass towers. Posters of political leaders and martyrs plastered the walls. It was a city of scars, worn with pride. They passed the port. Sophie's eyes narrowed behind her sunglasses. She scanned the stacks of shipping containers. Somewhere in there, Canaan's network was moving guidance systems. Somewhere in there was the reason she was here. She checked into the Hotel Albergo in Acrafier, a boutique hotel that exuded old-world charm. Her suite was on the top floor. As soon as the bellboy left, she swept the room. She took a device that looked like a tube of high-end lipstick from her purse. It was a frequency scanner. She walked the perimeter of the room, checking for bugs. Negative. She went to the balcony. The sun was setting over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. She pulled out her phone, a secured iPhone prepared by the technical unit. It had a dual operating system. If anyone checked it, it was a normal phone. If she entered a specific sequence of keystrokes, it accessed an encrypted partition linked directly to Tel Aviv via a series of bouncing VPNs. She typed a single message. The gallery is open. She stood there for a moment, breathing in the city. The sounds of car horns were relentless. This was her battlefield now. No flak jacket, no assault rifle. Just her wits, her cover, and the lies she had to live. For the first 3 weeks, Sophie did nothing but exist. She was establishing her pattern of life. She visited the Sursock Museum. She had lunch at Le Gray. She met with 2 legitimate gallery owners, discussing the potential acquisition of works by local artists. She created a footprint. She was seen. She was the wealthy French curator, mysterious and alone. Surveillance reports from the local Katsas, Mossad field officers, confirmed that Kanayan had been spotted twice in Gemaizeh during this period. But Sophie held back. The meeting had to be organic. It had to be fate. Gemaizeh District, Beirut, March 8, 2018, 22:30. Local time. The street was narrow, crowded with young people drinking beer on the sidewalks, music thumping from a dozen different bars. It was a carnival of escapism. Sophie walked through the crowd, wearing a navy blue silk dress that was elegant but conservative. She turned into a doorway marked only by a small neon saxophone. The Blue Note. Inside, the atmosphere changed instantly. The noise of the street was cut off by heavy velvet curtains. The lighting was low, amber and warm. The air smelled of single malt whiskey and wood polish. A jazz quartet was playing on the small stage: piano, bass, drums, saxophone. They were playing a slow, melancholic rendition of Autumn Leaves. Sophie scanned the room. He was there. Elias Kanayan sat at a corner table, alone. He was reading a hardcover book, a glass of red wine untouched in front of him. He looked exactly like the photos, but wearier. There was a heaviness to his shoulders. Sophie moved to the bar. She ordered a gin and tonic, specifically asking for Monkey 47 gin. It was a small detail, a signal of specific taste. She sat 2 stools away from the service area, positioning herself so she was in Kanayan's line of sight, but she didn't look at him. She watched the band, tapping her finger lightly on the stem of her glass. 20 minutes passed. Sophie felt the weight of the gaze before she saw it. Kanayan had looked up from his book. He was watching her, not with the predatory look of a man looking for a pickup, but with curiosity. She didn't fit the usual demographic of the bar. She was too still. The bartender moved to refill Kanayan's wine. Kanayan whispered something to him. The bartender nodded and walked over to Sophie. "Mademoiselle," the bartender said, "the gentleman in the corner wishes to know if the music is to your liking, or if you are simply tolerating it." Sophie turned slowly on her stool. She looked across the room. Kanayan held her gaze, his expression neutral, waiting. She smiled, a small, private smile. She turned back to the bartender. "Tell the gentleman that the piano player is rushing the tempo, but the saxophonist is saving him. And tell him that I prefer to buy my own drinks, but I would accept a recommendation on the wine." The bartender delivered the message. Kanayan laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh. He closed his book and stood up. He walked over to the bar. He moved with a fluid grace. Up close, Sophie could see the lines around his eyes. He smelled of expensive soap and cedarwood. "You have a good ear," Kanayan said, his voice a deep baritone, speaking in French. "The pianist is new. He's nervous." "Nerves are the enemy of art," Sophie replied, extending her hand. "Sophie Dubois." He took her hand. His grip was firm, dry. "Elias Kanayan." "A pleasure, Sophie. You are not from here." "I am from everywhere," she said enigmatically. "But currently I am trying to be here." "And what brings a woman from everywhere to a jazz club in a city that is falling apart?" "I look for beauty in broken things," Sophie said. "It's my profession. I'm an art consultant." Kanayan's eyes lit up. "Art? A noble pursuit. I am just a logistics man. I move boxes. Boring boxes." "Without logistics, the art doesn't arrive," Sophie countered. "You are the unsung hero of the gallery." He smiled, but his eyes flickered to her wrist. He saw the Patek Philippe, a 1954 Calatrava, he noted softly. Referender 2526, enamel dial. Sophie felt a surge of adrenaline. The bait had worked. "It was my grandfather's," she lied smoothly. "He taught me that time is the only luxury we cannot buy." Kanayan stared at the watch, then back at her face. A connection was formed. Not romantic, not yet, but intellectual. He had found someone who spoke his language. "Would you join me?" he asked, gesturing to his table. "The pianist is about to take a break, and I would love to hear more about beauty and broken things." "I would like that," Sophie said. She picked up her drink and followed him. As she walked, she tapped her finger against her thigh 3 times. A signal. Contact made. Mount Lebanon, Faria, April 2018. In the weeks that followed, Sophie and Elias fell into a rhythm. They were not lovers. Sophie played the role of the independent woman who wasn't looking for complications, but they became constant companions. They were the intellectual couple of the Beirut scene. They dined at M. Sharif, discussing politics and history. They drove up to the cedar reserves in Kanian's vintage Porsche 911. Sophie was careful. She never asked questions. She let him talk. She learned that Kanian was a man of deep contradictions. He loved Lebanon fiercely, but he hated the corruption of the state. He viewed his work with Hezbollah not as religious duty, but as a necessary evil to create a balance of power. "The weak are eaten, Sophie," he told her one afternoon as they stood on the balcony of his chalet in Faria, looking out over the snow-covered mountains. "In this region, if you do not have teeth, you are a meal. I help my country grow teeth." "Is that what you do?" Sophie asked, sipping her coffee. "You are a dentist?" He laughed. "Something like that. I ensure that the supply lines remain open, that the medical equipment arrives." He was testing her. The pause before medical equipment was deliberate. "Logistics is a headache," Sophie said, ignoring the subtext. "I have a crate of sculptures stuck in customs in Genoa right now. The Italians are impossible. They want certificates of origin for stone that is 2,000 years old." Canaan looked at her. "Genoa? I have friends in Genoa. The port authority there owes me a favor." Sophie's heart raced. This was the opening. "I couldn't ask you to." "Nonsense," Canaan interrupted. "Give me the shipping number. It will be released by tomorrow." Sophie hesitated, feigning reluctance. "You are too kind, Elias." She gave him the number of a dummy shipment the Mossad had planted in Genoa. It was a test. If Canaan could move it, it would prove his influence. More importantly, if she let him help her, it would create a debt. Psychological leverage. The next day, the shipment was released. Canaan felt powerful. He had helped the beautiful, sophisticated Frenchwoman. He was the provider. "You see," he said over dinner that night, "I can move mountains, or at least statues." "You are a magician," Sophie said. "But tell me, Elias, these friends of yours, are they safe?" Canaan's face grew serious. He leaned in. "Sophie, I live in a world of shadows, but in the shadows, I am the king. You are safe with me. Always." He reached out and covered her hand with his. It was the first intimate touch. "I have a problem, though," he admitted, his voice dropping. "A real problem, not statues." Sophie waited. "I have a shipment coming in next month. Very sensitive. High-tech components for telecommunications. My usual route through the airport is burned. The Americans are watching the cargo terminal too closely." He looked at her, gauging her reaction. "I need a new route. A route that looks completely innocent. Something that no one would suspect." Sophie took a sip of wine. She knew exactly where this was going. The trap she had built was about to snap shut. "Well," she said slowly, "I am bringing in a large exhibition of contemporary art from Europe in June. Large crates, heavy crates, mixed media, electronics, installations, very complex customs declarations." Canaan stared at her. The gears were turning. "Art," he whispered. "Who checks art?" "Nobody checks art, Elias," she said. "They are afraid to damage it, and they are afraid to look stupid if they don't understand it." Canaan smiled. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has just had a brilliant idea. "Sophie," he said, "I have a proposition for you. Industrial zone, outside Antwerp, Belgium. May 12, 2018, 03:15 local time." While Sophie Dubois was sipping espresso with Elias Canaan in the cafes of Gemaise, the real war was being fought in a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of Antwerp. The location was listed as a storage facility for a defunct textile company. In reality, it was a black site, rented by a Mossad front company 3 weeks prior. Inside, the air was sterile, smelling of soldering flux and rubbing alcohol. 3 men and 1 woman, technicians from Unit 81, the technological unit of the Intelligence Directorate, were huddled around a workbench. Under the harsh glare of surgical lamps lay the contents of 3 wooden crates that had been intercepted en route to Beirut. The manifest declared the contents as industrial HVAC controllers for a hospital renovation project. The reality was far more lethal. These were ring laser gyroscopes, high-precision navigation components manufactured in China, routed through a shell company in Dubai, and intended for the guidance systems of Hezbollah's Fateh 110 missiles. "Careful with the epoxy," the team leader, a man named Avram, whispered. "If we break the manufacturer's seal, Canaan's engineers will know." The technician next to him, wearing magnified loupes, used a laser-heated needle to microscopically soften the resin casing of the gyroscope. With the precision of a neurosurgeon, she lifted the casing. Inside lay the circuit board that controlled the missile's flight path. "Board exposed," she said, ready for the swap. This was the heart of the operation. The Mossad was not simply seizing the weapons. That would only delay the enemy. They were poisoning them. The team removed the original processing chips and replaced them with identical clones fabricated in a lab in Tel Aviv. To the naked eye, to a microscope, and even to standard diagnostic software, the chips were perfect. They would pass every power-on self-test. They would guide the missile perfectly during simulation. But the clones had a dormant logic gate hard-coded into their silicon. "Explain the payload again," Yossi, the mission commander, asked from the shadows of the room. He had flown in to oversee the critical phase. Avram didn't look up. "It's an accelerometer trigger. The chip functions normally until it detects a sustained G-force of 4.5 Gs for more than 3 seconds, the launch profile of a Fateh 110. Once that threshold is crossed, the guidance algorithm introduces a cumulative error of 0.02 degrees per second. It sounds small," Yossi noted. "Over a trajectory of 200 kilometers, it sends the missile 3 kilometers off target." Avram replied, sealing the casing back up. "They won't hit the Ministry of Defense. They'll hit the open sea or an empty field." "And the tracking?" "Passive RFID embedded in the resin," the female technician added. "It remains dormant until activated by a specific radio frequency burst. Once Sophie gets the crates into the bunker, we can ping them. We won't just know where the missiles are going, we'll know where they store them." It took them 6 hours to modify 40 units. By sunrise, the crates were resealed, the dust patterns on the lids meticulously recreated using a fine powder spray, and the manifest paperwork returned to its plastic sleeve. The truck driver, who had been sedated and sleeping in the back of his cab, was woken up. He had no memory of the stop. He believed he had pulled over for a nap. The Trojan horse was on its way to Beirut. Chapter 7. The Port of Shadows. Port of Beirut, Dock 14th, June 20th, 2018. The humidity in the port was suffocating. It was a chaotic labyrinth of stacked containers, rusting cranes, and corrupt officials. This was the artery of Lebanon, and it was clogged with bribes. Sophie stood in the shadow of a container, wearing a white hard hat and a high-visibility vest over her designer pantsuit. She looked out of place, yet entirely in command. Beside her stood Elias Canaan. "Relax," Canaan said, noticing her grip on her clipboard. "You look like you are waiting for an execution." "I am waiting for my reputation," Sophie shot back, channeling the anxiety of a businesswoman. "If this shipment is seized, my investors will pull out. I have $3 million of art in those crates, Elias." Canaan smiled. "The customs officer is named Captain Haddad. He is a friend." A jeep pulled up. Captain Haddad, a portly man with a sweat-stained uniform and eyes that constantly scanned for profit, stepped out. He held a clipboard. "Mademoiselle Dubois," Haddad said, looking her up and down. "Your paperwork is complex. Mixed media installations, electronics, metal alloys. This requires a level 4 inspection." Sophie's heart hammered against her ribs. A level 4 inspection meant opening the crates and x-raying the contents. If they x-rayed the art, they would see the dense metal housing of the gyroscopes hidden inside the abstract sculptures. She looked at Canaan. This was the test. Canaan stepped forward, placing a hand on Haddad's shoulder. He spoke in Arabic, his voice low and smooth. "Captain, Mademoiselle Dubois is a guest of our country. She is bringing culture to our city. We should not burden culture with bureaucracy, should we?" He slipped an envelope into Haddad's pocket. It was done with the practiced ease of a magician. Haddad patted the pocket. He looked at the crates, then at Sophie, then back at Canaan. "The heat makes us all tired," Haddad sighed. "Perhaps the scanner is overheating today. I will certify the visual inspection." He stamped the manifest. Cleared. Sophie let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Thank you, Captain. As the trucks were loaded, Kanayan turned to her. You see, the system works, if you know how to grease the gears. I owe you, Sophie said, looking him in the eye. Big time. You owe me nothing, Kanayan replied. But there is a dinner tonight, a private gathering. Some associates of mine. They are interested in logistics and art. I would like you to be there. Sophie froze internally. This was it, the inner circle. I would be honored, she said. As the truck carrying the sabotaged gyroscopes drove away towards a Hezbollah safe warehouse in the southern suburbs, the Dahieh, Sophie's phone, hidden in her purse, sent a single ping to a satellite overhead. Package delivered. Private villa, hills above Beirut, Rabia district, June 20th, 2018, 21 on local time. The villa was a fortress disguised as a palace. High walls, security cameras, and armed guards in suits standing discreetly by the gates. Sophie arrived in Kanayan's car. She wore a black evening gown, her hair pinned up. Embedded in the diamond brooch on her chest was a Nagra SD9 recording device, modified by the Mossad to transmit bursts of compressed audio via encrypted cellular frequencies. The dinner was intimate. 12 people seated around a long mahogany table. The atmosphere was heavy. These were not the bohemian artists of Jemaizeh. These were wolves. To Kanayan's right sat a man named Haj Radwan. A pseudonym, obviously. He was older, with a white beard and hard, dark eyes. Intelligence had identified him as a key liaison between Hezbollah's Jihad Council and the IRGC. To his left sat a younger man, Farid, a financier who laundered money through West African diamond mines. Kanayan introduced Sophie. This is Sophie Dubois, the woman who taught the Port Authority a lesson in efficiency today. The men chuckled politely, but their eyes were cold. They assessed her not as a woman, but as a potential security risk. Elias tells us you navigate the European banking system well, Ms. Dubois, Haj Radwan said, his voice rasping. That is a rare skill these days. The Americans are tightening the noose. The Americans are clumsy, Sophie replied coolly, taking a sip of water. They look for large waves. I prefer to swim in the undercurrents. My clients value discretion above all else. Discretion is a commodity, Radwan said. It is more valuable than gold. Throughout the dinner, the conversation shifted between innocuous topics and terrifying business. They spoke of agricultural machinery needed in the south, missile launchers. They spoke of fertilizer shipments, explosives. They spoke of the architect, Kanayan, and his brilliance in hiding their supply chains. Sophie ate slowly, her mind racing. She was recording everything. Voices, names, locations mentioned in passing. Then the conversation turned to the shipment she had helped clear. The new guidance units, Farid asked Kanayan. Are they secure? They are in the warehouse in Chuefat, Kanayan confirmed. We will move them to the production sites in the Becca tomorrow night. The art cover was perfect. No one looks at modern art. Good, Radwan nodded. The struggle requires precision. We cannot waste fire. Sophie felt a chill. She was sitting next to men planning mass murder, discussing it like a corporate merger. After dinner, Kanayan took her to the terrace for a cigarette. The city lights twinkled below them. They like you, Kanayan said, sounding relieved. Radwan is suspicious of his own shadow, but he likes you. They are intense men, Sophie said carefully. They are men under siege, Kanayan replied. He looked tired. He leaned against the railing, looking at the moon. Do you ever wonder, Sophie, if we are on the wrong side of history? The question hung in the air. It was a moment of extreme vulnerability. A handler would tell her to exploit it, to push him. History is written by the winners, Elias, she said softly. We just have to make sure we survive to read it. He looked at her, a profound sadness in his eyes. Survival. Yes, that is all it is now. He reached out and touched her cheek. I am glad you are here. You make the darkness less absolute. Sophie forced a smile. Inside, she was screaming. She was falling into the classic trap of deep cover work, empathy for the target. She had to remind herself of the missiles, of the intention. He is not a victim, she told herself. He is the architect. Sophie's apartment, Acrefier, July 10, 2018. 3 weeks had passed since the dinner. The operation was entering a critical, stagnant phase. The Trojan horse components were in place, but the Mossad wanted more. They wanted the network. They wanted the list of every supplier Canaan used in Europe and South America. To get that, Sophie needed access to his digital life. The stress was beginning to fracture her. She wasn't sleeping. She woke up at 3 a.m. reaching for a gun that wasn't there. She found herself checking her mirrors constantly. Her handler, Yossi, requested a brush pass meeting. They met in a crowded souk in Tripoli, far from Beirut. Yossi was disguised as a tourist. They bumped into each other near a spice stall. "You look tired," Yossi muttered without looking at her, examining a bag of saffron. "I'm fine," Sophie whispered. "The humidity. Don't lie to me, Sarah. Your heart rate biometrics are spiking every time you are with him. Are you compromised?" "No. He trusts me completely. He's opening up. He is not your friend," Yossi hissed. "He is a target. Do not forget the file. Do not forget the bus bombing in Bulgaria. He moved the explosives for that. He signed the checks." "I know," she snapped too loud. A woman nearby looked at her. Sophie lowered her voice. "I know. He is human, Yossi. He's not a caricature." "That makes him more dangerous," Yossi said. "Listen to me. We are moving to the end game. We need his laptop, the encrypted ledger. He keeps it in a safe in his private office at the Blue Note. Not the villa, the club." "The club? It's too public." "Exactly. He thinks it's safe because it's always crowded. He has a birthday party coming up next week. You will be the guest of honor. You will get us that drive. And then we burn him." Sophie felt a knot in her stomach. "What happens to him?" Yossi turned to her, his eyes cold behind his sunglasses. "That is not your concern. Your concern is the data. Get the data, Sarah. Come home." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Sophie stood alone amidst the smell of cumin and cardamom. She felt an immense wave of loneliness. She was lying to Canaan. She was lying to the world. She was beginning to forget who Sarah was. She drove back to Beirut in a daze. That night, Canaan came to her apartment. It was the first time he had been there. He brought a bottle of wine and a small gift wrapped in velvet. "For the woman who saves me from boredom," he said. She opened it. It was a first edition of a book of poetry by Khalil Gibran. Inside, he had written an inscription, "To Sophie, who understands the silence between the notes." Sophie stared at the book. Guilt, sharp and acidic, rose in her throat. "Elias," she started. "Shh," he said. "I don't want to talk about business tonight. Tonight, just be Sophie." They sat on her balcony drinking wine. Canaan talked about his childhood, about the war, about seeing his father die. He talked about his dream of leaving the logistics business, of buying a small vineyard in France and disappearing. "I am tired, Sophie," he admitted. "I have built a machine I cannot control. Sometimes I think the only way out is a bullet." "Don't say that," she said, instinctively reaching for his hand. "It's the truth. In my world, there is no retirement." He looked at her deeply. Unless someone gave me a reason to leave." He was offering her a way out. He was falling in love with her. He was ready to defect, perhaps, if she asked him. For a split second, Sophie considered it. Could she bring him in? Could she turn him? Then she remembered Yossi's voice. He moved the explosives for the bus bombing. She squeezed his hand. "We all have our escapes, Elias. We just have to find the right moment." "My birthday," he said suddenly. "Next week, at the club. I want you there. I want to make an announcement." "An announcement?" "Yes. I am going to make changes. Big changes." Sophie smiled, the smile of a shark. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." The trap was set. But as Canaan left that night, Sophie went to the bathroom and vomited. She washed her face, looked in the mirror, and saw a stranger staring back. "One more week," she whispered to the reflection. "Just one more week." Mossad Technical Workshop, Tel Aviv, July 15, 2018. The extraction of data from Canaan's laptop required a tool that was physically small but digitally devastating. The technicians presented the device to the courier who would take it to Beirut. It was a standard-looking USB drive, but the connector was modified to bypass the physical air-gap protections of military-grade laptops. It's a zero-click exploit, the tech explained. She doesn't need to guess the password. She just needs to plug it in. The drive exploits a vulnerability in the BIOS. It will clone the hard drive in under 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a lifetime in a hostile environment, the courier noted. It's the best we can do. Tell her to create a distraction. Back in Beirut, Sophie received the package in a dead drop, a hollowed-out rock placed in a park in Akrafi. She retrieved the USB drive and hid it in the lining of her evening clutch. She spent the days leading up to the party memorizing the blueprints of the Blue Note. The office was in the back past the kitchen. It had a keypad lock. She had the code from surveillance. Kanian used his mother's birthday, and a physical key for the safe. She had to steal that from his pocket or find the spare. She practiced the sequence in her head. Dance. Drug the drink? No, too risky. Spill a drink. Go to the back to clean up. Access office. Open safe. Plug in drive. Wait 3 minutes. Exit. It sounded simple, but in the field, simple things are the first to break. On the morning of the party, Sophie woke up with a sense of doom. The sky over Beirut was gray, heavy with dust from the desert. She received a final message on her secure phone. Green light. Execute tonight. Extraction team on standby at Point Alpha. Point Alpha was a secluded cove north of Batroun, where a Navy SEAL team, Shayatet 13, would be waiting with a Zodiac boat to take her to a submarine waiting in international waters. There was no turning back. Tonight, Sophie Dubois would die, and Elias Kanayan would be destroyed.